Too Much Information is a production of iHeart Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Too Much Information, the show that brings you the secret histories and little-known fascinating facts and figures behind your favorite movies, music, TV shows, and more. We are your two burnouts of banality, your geeks of good-natured nerdery, your freaks of facts. I'm Alex Heigl.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh. I try not to read ahead to see what you're going to say.
To see where I'm going with this?
Reaction. Yeah. It's a good one.
Today, Jordan, we are talking about one of the most cultishly beloved shows around the turn of the century, which still feels weird every time I say it, but I'm going to keep doing it. The 18 episodes that launched 1,000 ships and inspired countless air drumming sessions. That's right. We're talking about Freaks and Geeks. I have very dim memories of watching this show when it was airing, but apparently I might have Mandela affected it, considering it was on for like 2 consecutive weeks and then just moved around constantly. But I remember watching it. I might have confused it with Wonder Years, though. But yeah, I really only caught up with it long after it was done. And I don't know, I was a little bit between a freak and a geek in high school. I hung out with the dirty punk rock kids and played punk rock, but I was also in a competition entering and winning jazz band.
I was too.
Yeah. And I was also in Shakespeare Club. So for
that
2 years.
Rules. Well, you were King
No,
Lear,
it doesn't.
right?
I played King Lear, yes.
That's
and one of
amazing.
the weird sisters. But I wondered when I pitched this if, because this was happening at the tail end of the 70s, it was going to fall outside of your wheelhouse.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, this was something that I never watched, and I deeply regret it. I never watched any of it.
I was going to say, you
episode.
loved it.
Here's what happens. This has been recommended to me so many times over the years. I think even when it was on, because I loved Wonder Years as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I do this thing when too many people recommend something to me that I just, out of some mix of rebellion
dig
and
your heels
spite,
in, you're like,
no, I'm not. You don't know me. And I've missed out on so many great things over the years, and this was one of them. But you're right. Partially, 1980 is, I think, maybe one of my least favorite years in pop culture history. Aesthetically, sonically, it's the year John Lennon was killed. I don't know. It's got a lot of knocks against it for me. Just not my thing. So yeah, the show was always kind of tainted for me for that reason, which is dumb. But also, I just kind of got the sense that it was going to be almost more like that 70s show 2.0. I thought it was going to be this very broad, gross out, almost fratty style comedy. But, in the last week or so, I've caught up on about half the series or so and got the highlights from the rest of the episodes. And I was just blown away by how heartfelt and sweet it was and how real it was. I mean, they really were swinging for the Wonder Years territory. And the show, it just went deep. I mean, in the pilot episode, we learned that the main character, Linda Cardellini's character, Lindsay, was alone with her grandma when she died. And now she's dealing with this crisis of faith in God, faith in hope, faith in the fundamental goodness of the universe, whatever you want to call it, this true loss of innocence. And this isn't like, Eugene from Greece or Revenge of the Nerds. It's like a lot more nuanced and heartfelt than I ever thought, which is, why it's lived on and continued to resonate with so many.
Yeah, I mean, heart is really the watchword for this.
Yeah.
It's just the one that comes back and back and back. And, people throw that around with sitcoms, and there's a lot of things that I don't like. Like Parks and Rec is like sincere and heartfelt, but it's in such a contrived and sitcom-y way, whereas the show is really just like, here's a bunch of characters you like, and here are the entire spectrum of human experience that they will be subject to.
I just think it's so clever from just even in the opening shot of the pilot where they have the attractive football player in his Letterman jacket and the beautiful cheerleader having a corny heart-to-heart like Heathcliff on the moors type moment on the bleachers.
The camera just keeps going.
He pans right down to these like freaks congregating like ants under a rock under the bleachers, and they're smoking pot and talking about Molly Hatchet. It's just such a clear declaration of what this show was. These stories about kids that you didn't usually see on TV, at least up to that point. Usually shows and movies dealt with either geeks in a cartoonish way with tape on their glasses and pocket protectors, or you got Dawson's Creek syndrome with these gorgeous, like early 20-somethings with gray hair and perfect skin.
It's coming out of 90210 Melrose, and then you got all the weepy WB stuff where again everyone is still like a model.
Yeah, I mean, I think in real life most of us weren't, in the quote rich jock popular crowd or the nerd category. We were somewhere in the middle. And I think as a newcomer to Freaks and Geeks, every episode had at least one incident that I connected with on a deeply embarrassing, almost primal personal level. Down to the pilot. I love that, with a scene where at the end of the pilot, when the littlest geek, Sam, gets to dance with his crush to come sail away at the school dance. And he thinks it's this romantic slow dance. And then right when he gets onto the dance floor, the rock section starts and he panics because slow dancing is the only kind of dancing that socially awkward people can handle. I speak from experience. And the look on his face is hilarious. It's like he's been betrayed by God. But literally that same thing happened to me, except it was with Stairway to Heaven. For some reason, the big last dance song at my high school was Stairway to Heaven. And and then when the fast part would start, I wouldn't know what to do. So, but unlike me, the kid on the show actually starts to enjoy himself. And the show's creator, Paul Feig, said of that moment, what seems like not really a victory is actually a victory. And that's what this show is all about. I like that.
Yeah. Well, from the deep roster of real-life experiences Judd Apatow drew on to write for the show, to the lengthy battle over the extensive musical playlist that soundtracked it, to the perhaps odd, I actually don't know how common this is, but I'm going to go ahead and call it odd, the odd lengths that the wardrobe department went through to ensure accuracy for the period clothing. Here is everything you didn't know about Freaks and Geeks. Did you notice that I made all of these headers Rush songs?
Yes, I did.
Good. At the heart of Freaks and Geeks is the comic duo pairing, I don't know.
Yeah.
Judd Apatow and Paul Feig, who met in the LA comedy scene in the mid-'80s. As Apatow explained for Vanity Fair's incredible 2013 oral history of the show, he met Feig at the Ranch, which was, quote, this incredibly cheap house a bunch of comedians rented really deep in the boonies in the San Fernando Valley. It was all these guys who would come out to LA from the Midwest, and all they did was smoke cigarettes and watch infomercials.
That's amazing.
Sounds like members of my extended family. Feig said, Judd was younger than everyone else. He was really considered to be just a kid. But at the same time, he was booking his own stand-up night at some club, working for Comic Relief. So, by the 90s, Apatow had a development deal at DreamWorks, which seems wild based on what he actually got it on, which was Ben Stiller's show, Larry Sanders' show, which are obviously critically beloved things, but it wasn't like he was known as the showrunner for that. And then he had Heavyweights, which was also Paul Feig is in that, and Paul Feig was also in something called Ski Patrol, I remember nothing about. And I guess he had also been on Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Yeah, he was Mr. Poole, the teacher of the first season.
Means nothing to me. Dirty Dancing, Good Sports, so kind of an what you might call an under-the-radar television career.
Heavyweights rips. We should totally do an episode on that. Yeah. It also has Sean Weiss, the kid from the Mighty Ducks, who had a recurring role on Freaks and Geeks.
And, as all things do,
yes,
they come
Paul
back
Feig
to...
had a bit part in my beloved That Thing You Do as a DJ. So it's such a great little, understated scene in the movie. He's just like this DJ, and he's like, all right, everybody, we got the Wonders in here. Say hi, guys. And they're all just say hi. And then he just plays a song. And he's like, all right, guys, thanks for coming on in. And just lets them go. That's all they needed.
Well, in between all of that, or I guess after all of that, he wrote, directed, and starred in an independent feature called Life Sold Separately. But he'd sunk all of his resources into promoting that, didn't really go anywhere, and he'd also lost the Sabrina gig. So as he said to Vanity Fair, everything had kind of hit the rocks. I was really at my lowest point. So he pivoted to this long unrealized goal he had of writing about his high school experience. He told Vulture in 2015, I told my wife, I want to write a pilot. I have an idea based on when I was in high school. It's about the nerds and the burnouts, and it's called Freaks and Geeks. She high-fived me. Which rules. And then I wrote it in 2 weeks, and I gave it to my wife, and she said, you've got to send this to Judd. Within 12 hours, he said, I love it. I want to do this.
I guess he had kind of an open invitation from Judd Apatow to send him any ideas that he was working
Yeah.
on. I think Judd specifically said years later, like, yeah, I didn't actually think he would, but but he took him up on it, and Judd loved it. It's worth noting that Fox had recently passed on another of Judd Apatow's idea, a pilot called Sick in the Head, which was a sitcom about a rookie psychiatrist's first days working in the psych ward. And David Krumholtz was cast in the lead, and a pre-SNL Amy Poehler played one of his suicidal patients. Comedy history could have been completely different if that show got picked up. He probably wouldn't have been working on Freaks and Geeks. But Freaks and Geeks was really going in the face of, we mentioned the top of the episode, all the usual teen shows that were out there, which more often than not focus on the popular kids or how the underdog succeeded. This was basically how the unpopular kids failed, but survived anyway. Judd Apatow told the New York Times, Paul was very passionate about the show being about kids who failed at the things that they were attempting to do during high school. It was an argument against wish fulfillment television.
I love that line. Feig also pegged a sort of unlikely source of inspiration for the show to the Washington Post. He told them, my friend Matt Reeves at the time had just created Felicity with J.J. Abrams. And I saw the pilot and remember thinking, that's such a great way to do a show, an hour-long show. I'll write a spec pilot with an hour-long show just to do something. I came up with the name Freaks and Geeks first. That is a bizarre thing to me to see that Felicity inspired Freaks and Geeks. But
yeah, that's pretty weird. He tells the story in one of the zillion oral histories that I read about Freaks and Geeks, that he was out on the road doing stand-up just to try to bring some money in because all his acting gigs had dried up. And I think he was in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And he was he had just started writing the pilot for Freaks and Geeks, and he was kind of walking around near the venue before a show, and he saw a group of teenagers, and he saw this one girl in it who was like, he could kind of tell like didn't really fit in with all the toughs, but she was like kind of trying to kind of make it in that group. And he just said that he saw her and just was like, oh, that's the one I want to write about. I want to write about that. That was the Lindsay character. He just saw this face just in the crowd, and that kind of became his inspiration for Linda Cardellini's character. But yeah, one of the things that stuck out about me while watching this show for the first time is that it's so weird that a show like this is an hour long. I mean, usually dramas get the hour-long treatment, but I'm hard-pressed to think of a show that has as much comedy as Freaks and Geeks that gets the hour-long treatment. And they talk about this in a documentary that came out a few years ago on A&E. But yeah, it's basically impossible to understate what a weird show this was for its time. Even the director thought when they watched the pilot back, this is great, but it doesn't really feel like a pilot. Because there were really very few single-camera sitcoms at the time. Again, that was something that was reserved for dramas. Sitcoms were half-hour and multi-camera. Think of Friends. Think of Frasier. Think of all those types of shows.
do you want to do a sidebar on single-camera versus multi-camera?
The way I think of single-camera is that it basically looks like a movie, whereas multi-camera is I Love Lucy style. I think they kind of pioneered it, where you've got a bunch of cameras set up on a stage set that looks almost like a play set, and they can film it a lot quicker like that. That's why you can do it in front of a live studio audience. It's basically like taping a play. But
Gotcha.
yeah, single camera is more like doing a movie. And yeah, Freaks and Geeks was this strange mix in both in its format and also thematically. And to hear the creators and executives tell it, and obviously this is a gross oversimplification, it seems mostly like shows were either these like glamorous shows set in New York or LA, your Just Shoot Me's, your Suddenly Susans, your Frasers. I guess Frasier was Seattle, but like
Seattle.
Your Friends. Yeah, like these very urban type shows, or these teen dramas in these small towns like Dawson's Creek, Charmed, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Friday Night Lights, those types of shows. If you squint, Freaks and Geeks was a bit of that 70s show mixed with Malcolm in the Middle, but the new ingredient that they brought was, said at the top of the episode, heart. And the humor in Freaks and Geeks was behavioral. It wasn't just like a series of setups for jokes, which is kind of the sitcom standard. There's an expression in the industry for sitcoms, at least back then, 3 jokes a page. I think I remember hearing that in screenwriting school too. The pace of laughs on Freaks and Geeks was a lot slower, which would come back to haunt them.
That's why the character moments are all so strong, is because everything
Yeah.
has such time to breathe. It's not just like, I'm up here sweating my, like pounding the floorboards kind of thing. It's like you can
Covered in
actually
flop
like,
sweat.
yeah, exactly. You just like get these nice moments, and this is partially why some of it's so uncomfortable, because you just like linger on Jason Segel's dreams being crushed. Apatow, yeah, I know. Apatow took the script to Dan McDermott, who is then head of DreamWorks Television, and that he told Vanity Fair for their history, within 24 hours, I'd say we got a pass from Fox, from CBS, from ABC. A day or two later, we heard from Shelley McRory, a development exec at NBC. She said, if we don't make this show, quitting the television business.
They really thought that Fox would be a big sell because of 90210 and shows like that have been a big success for that network. Apparently, NBC liked it because this was the year that the Todd Solondz movie Welcome to the Dollhouse came out, which was one of the movies that we talked about that inspired Cruel Intentions. So TV networks were trying to do something in that flavor, which sounds weird because that was a dark art house movie that I can't imagine made a lot of money, but...
Yeah, Feig poured himself into the characters as well. He said Sam Weir's who I was in high school. Bill Haverchuck is part of who I was. Neil Schreiber is part of who I was. Lindsay Weir is who I was in my 30s writing the show. My friends and I weren't popular in high school, he added to Vanity Fair. We weren't dating all the time, and we were just trying to get through our lives. It was important to me to show that side. John Francis Daley is that kid who has that just incredible deadpan.
Yeah,
he's
the main kid. He's the littlest
Sam.
kid, and he's like the only kid who looks his age on the show.
He was the only one who was his actual age. I think he auditioned at 13 and was playing the role by 14. And he told Vulture the writers would get together and basically talk about all the worst things that happened to them in their childhood. Parents breaking up, being bullied, all these embarrassing stories. And then he says, one that never made it into the show is that Paul dressed up in his mom's clothes. Then all of a sudden, the neighbors came to his door and told him that his mom or his dad was in a terrible car accident. So he ran to the scene, completely forgetting he was wearing a dress. His mom saw him wearing her clothes, and it became even more of an issue than the car accident itself. I would love to have seen that film for this show. Fun fact, Jesse Eisenberg, who at that time I think was just the Pepsi Girls' sibling.
Oh my God,
he was not known as... He was not Jesse Eisenberg back then. He was the second choice for that character. Shockingly, they met with very little resistance throughout the development process. And Feig explained, we went over to NBC, and I remember feeling that new person in the industry kind of indignation. Like, if they want to change this at all, I'm not going to do the show. So I start to make that speech, and Shelley goes, don't change a thing. There was really so much support for this show, and then... not at all. It just quickly evaporated. I
think Jason Segel had this great quote in one of the oral histories that was like, we had the naivety to just think that we could make the best show in the world. And that was just how we approached everything. None of us had really failed enough to know that there could be an alternative.
Yeah. Apatow said Paul showed up when we started production with this Bible he'd written about the show, hundreds of pages long with every character in detail, what they wore, their favorite songs. I asked him to write another few episodes to explore the world, and he banged out 2 more. We took a lot of moments from them and put them into the pilot.
I just want to add that this allegedly massive show Bible was apparently 21,000 words, or roughly the length of our script for the back-to-back Revolver episodes for this show. So,
the show's pilot is notably one of the only episodes with a tidy, self-contained, happy little ending, which the writers decided to implement in case the show didn't get picked up, and then the pilot could just live on its own.
How would it live on? You think it would live on as like a short film?
I think they just meant that they maybe could have kept the rights and like used it in like a show reel. I don't know, whatever the term. Probably not a sizzle reel if it's a full-length pilot.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know anything about the entertainment industry. What do you call them?
I mean, a clip reel, but you wouldn't put a full length. You wouldn't put a full length thing in a clip reel. Well, I guess if you're a director, maybe you would. As a screenwriting major, I was really interested in how they went about writing the scripts for this show. And the writers basically spent their first 2 weeks together in what they described as an extended group therapy session, which, having been in a lot of these writing rooms before, I could say it is very much like a group therapy session. Judd Apatow said he wanted writers who'd been around and lived life and had done some things, and specifically had done some bad things. So he wrote this questionnaire. I think this is brilliant. He wrote a questionnaire that he distributed to the writers that had questions like, what's the worst thing that ever happened to you in high school? What's the best thing that happened to you in high school? What's the most trouble you got into with your parents? What's your best drug experience? What's your worst drug experience? And obviously all writers put their life experiences into these sorts of projects, but I just thought it was really smart, a really methodical way to go about it, leading these people to just plumb the depths of their souls because, you know, that's the kind of stuff that resonates on the screen, these really personal stories. And they would go around the writer's room table and share the most, you know, embarrassing story of their lives. And everybody would groan and, you know, they're looking for the most painful thing. And everybody would groan and say, okay, well, that's the one we'll do for the episode. And then somebody around the table would chime in and say, oh, actually, wait a minute. I got one that's worse. And then they would they just would be constantly one-upping each other for teenage humiliation. And like a good example was the episode where Sam gets the Parisian night suit or that baby blue disco jumpsuit. That was something that really happened to Paul Feig. He got this leisure suit onesie and wore it to school thinking that he was going to be the coolest guy there. And when he arrived, he promptly realized he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. And he said, it was fun on the show, recreating the most horrific moment of my past. And Judd Apatow, he always talks about how whenever Paul Feig would tell these stories of humiliation from his childhood, someone would inevitably ask, how old were you when that happened? Like 12, 13? And he would always reluctantly respond, 17. He was always like a little older than everyone assumed. But yeah, these stories cut so close to the bone. There was that plot line where Neil suspects that his dad's cheating and he finds a garage door clicker in his dad's car that doesn't open the family garage. So he bikes all over town pointing the clicker at different houses just to see which door it opens. And then he finally finds the right one and the stranger's garage door opens up and there's his dad's car inside. That was a real story from one of the writers. Like he actually did that, which is heartbreaking.
Yeah, that's such a, I mean, that's like a John Cheever short story or something. Like that's such a great image and
yeah. Oh yeah, this kid just by himself. It's horrendous. And the director Ken Kwapis, who I later knew from all of his work on The Office, he's a regular director on The Office. He said there was always a sort of low-level depression just underneath these stories, and it's true. The goofiness of Freaks and Geeks is always tempered by these truly devastating moments. And that can go bad. I mean, as much as I love MASH, one of my favorite TV shows ever, sometimes that can get a little grating and seem a little preachy. It can seem a little heavy-handed.
Yeah, that's the bit about it. Did I send you the Futurama thing where they have the Alan Alda bot that has a switch that goes between comic and maudlin? Yeah.
But I don't sense that on this show at all. It's a really incredible blend.
If it had gone on, it would have been ruined, just like everything.
Yeah.
They decided explicitly that they were going to cast believable-looking kids for the show, which, again, weirdly, the network was shockingly fine with. Some of the notes that they started getting is really funny. Gabe Sachs, one of the writers, told The Guardian that they wanted to. Well, first of all, they wanted Franco to take off his shirt. They wanted James Franco to be shirtless and see. And they also pitched Britney Spears appearing as like a waitress, as like stunt casting. They were like, she's hot right now. Try and get her in the show. They were like, you people don't understand us.
They did get Ben Stiller to appear as a favor to Judd Apatow in I think the 17th episode. But by that time, the show was already canceled. So it was kind of too little too late. But believability was really the watchword for Paul, all the way down to the dialogue. And as he wrote in the show Bible that he put together, which I think you can find online, I saw excerpts from it on Slate. He wrote, "The show must be real. The teens in this series will talk like real teens. They will never be too clever or grown up sounding. We don't want a bunch of teenage Neil Simons spouting off wittily. These kids generally engage in teenage put downs. They overextend their language, as in, oh, yeah, well, you're a big idiot. That's what you are. And they never talk in that writer's, now I'm in my 30s and I now know what I'd say in that high school situation, so I'll give this kid a snappy comeback style of writing. These kids have to deal with each other with whatever is in the lexicon of a teenager and nothing more. And despite the fact that most of us think, if I knew then what I know now, I'd be really cool and in control, the sad truth is that if we knew what we know now when we were in high school, we probably would get beaten up on a regular basis because teenage bullies don't respond well to clever put-downs at their expense.
True.
The Freaks and Geeks Show Bible is very entertaining. Look it up.
They filmed the pilot at Ulysses S. Grant High School in L.A., which sounds... Why did they do that? Why did they name somewhere in a high school in Los Angeles after a Civil War general? Anyway, probably one of the most, if not the, I don't know, I couldn't find the superlative, but one of the most filmed locations in modern cinema. But the rest of the episodes were filmed in a meticulously recreated set thereof. They had to do that partially because they had to avoid palm trees in all the shots, because this is supposed to be set in Michigan.
Yeah, I looked up stuff that was shot at Grant High School, and I quickly got overwhelmed. Euphoria filmed a bit there, so did some of Clueless. It was used as the exterior for Saved by the Bell. The Office filmed a bit there, as well as the videos for Iggy Azalea's Fancy, which makes sense because it was a Clueless rip. Yep. P. Diddy's All About the Benjamins, and the video for Wheatus's Deathless Teenage Dirtbag. So quite a history. But yeah, after the pilot got picked up, they built a T-shaped hallway that stood in for the school. And I don't know why I find this so great. Whenever the student extras walked past the camera, they had to just stand at the end of the hallway quietly because there's nowhere for them to go. They just congregated back there. And the show Bible, which again, Slate has online, you can look this up, lists all the stuff that Paul Feig wanted going on in the background of the hallway to make it feel real. And his detail is just insane. He said he wanted to see a punching contest between two friends, band kids selling candy bars, freak couples making out, janitors sweeping the hallway with red sawdust, kids carrying around their cumbersome science fair projects, and girls coming up to a group of guys and telling them that one of the girls likes them. I love that. The attention to detail. It's like Truman Show level world building.
Casting trivia dump. Sam Levine, who played Neil, told Vulture, "There's the way that the characters were written in the pilot before anyone was cast. And then that changed after Judd and Paul and the director, Jake Kasdan, cast all the child actors. They really, really wrote to our strengths, and it seemed a more authentic outcome." Emmy award-winning casting director Allison Jones was brought in for the show. In fact, the only Emmy this show won was for its casting.
Which, it deserved it.
Yeah. And Feig told Variety, "We did tons of casting sessions. It was very apparent each time the right person would walk in. Some of them weren't exactly the way that they were written in the script. We decided, let's just rewrite the character." So we have John Francis Daly, who I mentioned was 13 when he auditioned. He told Vanity Fair he was really sick. He said, "I think that helped me ultimately because it let me put my guard down. I was just focused on not throwing up."
He always on the show kind of looks a little nauseous. I feel like.
Yeah. That's part of his brand. He added to Vulture, "He was kind of the odd man out because of his youth. I was 14 and I was the only one who didn't have body hair. He was so young, or at the very least so sheltered, that he still believed in Santa Claus when he was filming this show." And Seth Rogen gleefully disabused him of that notion. Seth Rogen, he was talking to Vulture, and I don't even know what he was being interviewed for, but at some point he was like, "I will ruin it for you if you still believe in Santa Claus." When John Francis Daly was filming Freaks and Geeks, he let it slip that he maybe sort of believed in Santa Claus, and Rogen wrecked his world right then and there.
He's 14. Come on.
I know, it's too old. That was Rogen's point.
Yeah.
Sweet boy, though. Little deer in the headlights boy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, in a sense, that's very true to high school because everyone comes in at these different maturity levels where you do have kids that, still believe in Santa, and then kids that, are shaving and, look like they could be in their 20s. The minds behind the show really had a hard time casting the Sam role. because they didn't want to do the classic TV thing of casting an 18-year-old who looked 13 or 14. And Paul Feig said that John Francis Daley, I love this quote, had a glass head because you look into his eyes and you see everything that he's thinking and everything that he's going through. Yeah, those massive eyes. Yeah, that's so true. For his crush/girlfriend at whatever time on the show, Cindy the cheerleader, they were considering a young Kaylee Cuoco. Isn't that weird? Yeah. Side note, apparently in that episode where they watch a reel-to-reel porn, they're actually watching a porn in that scene.
Is that illegal? Can't you not show porn to underage kids?
You know what? That's a good point. I should look that up again.
Linda Cardellini, who is then 23, was cast as the 16-year-old Lindsay, Sam's older sister. Lindsay was the only character not based on somebody I knew, Feig told Vanity Fair, but Linda was the exact person I had in my head. When she walked in, it was just like, she's alive. Director Jake Kasdan, who also edited the show, told the magazine, we used to say in editing that you could always cut to Linda and she'd be doing the right thing.
It's nuts that the chemistry on this show was so good, considering that she's like 10 years older than the kid playing her brother. Like, that's so nuts. And like, I think the girl who plays her best friend Millie on the show, she was like 15 in real life too. So that's, again, like almost 10 years apart. And, you know, it's one thing if it's like Grease, where all the actors are in their late 20s and they're all kind of at the same level. But I mean, the age range here is crazy, but they still have that camaraderie. I just think that's so impressive in a group with the age span so huge.
Martin Starr as Bill Haverchuck. When Martin Starr came in, there was no question in my mind that he was Bill, Feig told Vulture. He reminded me so much of the kid that I based the character on. Apatow said, I have to say the first time I saw Martin on tape, I wasn't sure. It was the first time Martin Starr had tested for anything, so that makes sense. And then I saw him in person and thought, this guy's incredible. It was really a creation, and Martin understood it, but I think he was doing a character more than anyone else.
Yeah, if you see him interviewed, like, he definitely seems like a completely different person than, whereas the kid who plays Neil kind of seems like Neil.
Jake Kasdan, the director, added to Vanity Fair, the blank stare and the way Martin's doing those affects, mouth hanging open, it's just this incredibly subtle, inspired comic character. We figured out how to write it and play to it, but it was not on the page initially, and it wasn't him playing himself either. He could make you cry laughing by doing almost nothing. Then it turned out he could do anything. This is just a funny detail. They were allowed to use the gym at Raleigh Studios in Hollywood, and Martin Starr started going every day with James Franco and like put on muscle weight. And they were like, yeah, buddy, you can't be buff for this role. You have to stop going to the gym so much.
That's why they made him wear a robe in the locker room scenes.
Yes.
And they had a similar discussion with not a kind of similar discussion with the women in the cast. In order to ensure that they look like real people, they suggested that they didn't lose any weight for the roles. And Busy Phillips recalled in her memoir that Judd Apatow took them aside and told them that they were, quote, perfect the way we were, and that he wanted to make sure we didn't feel any pressure to be thin from anyone because that wasn't what they wanted, which I guess is a nice message to young actresses.
Yeah, it's cute.
Meanwhile, James Franco and Seth Rogen were apparently both on a strict vegan diet during filming because Seth Rogen wanted to lose weight.
That's so funny. Yeah, in that same gym interview, they were like, Rogen wasn't going. He was like, no. Sam Levine is Neo Schreiber. Sam Levine was 16 when he was cast for this. He told Vanity Fair, my audition wasn't terribly good, but I had asked beforehand if I could do my William Shatner as part of it. Which is terrible. That's the point. And Feig said, Levine looks past the camera to the casting director and goes, now? Can I? And then he goes into a William Shatner impression that was just so corny and silly. And Judd's like, that's all of us when we were in high school, just trying to be funny, just doing stupid Shia LaBeouf also read for that role. He said it came in, I think, basically looking like his Even Stevens character in like a Hawaiian shirt.
Oh my God.
I think he was like really under the thrall of Kramer at the time. Like from Seinfeld as a
oh wow,
go figure.
Can you do a Shatner?
No.
Oh,
yes,
really?
I can. I'm just not going to.
Okay. All right. Yeah,
we should just punch in the Rocket Man performance that he does, because that's really what I'd be doing. I'd be doing the Family Guy Stewie.
Yeah. Your
man,
Stewie's pretty flawless.
It's just it's my Paul one.
Yeah.
Not gonna be working on your little novel there. Yeah, I can't believe that show pulled that out like pre-internet when you would have just I remember seeing that live and being like,
What is
what
that?
the hell
Yeah.
is this? And then later being like, it's a reference to a live performance William Shatner did once at an awards show. They just made uninterrupted space on their primetime animated comedy to just reference that.
Sending
sending
the narrative to just a screeching halt for like 90 seconds.
Anyway, Family Guy sidebar over. James Franco as Daniel Desario. Perhaps unsurprisingly, given what we know about Franco in 2022, which just Google James Franco allegations, get a quick read on that. People's memories of him on this show are checkered. Apatow said, he seemed perfect to be a small town cool guy who wasn't as cool as he thought he was, which is a devastating put down of James Franco's entire being. When all the women in our office started talking about how gorgeous he was, me and Feig just started laughing because we didn't see it.
Yeah, in this A&E documentary I mentioned earlier about the show, Paul Feig says that he was kind of like, oh, no, we don't want him on the show. I didn't know that he was hot. I just thought he was goofy looking.
He looks like a lizard.
There's this audition footage of James Franco reading for Nick, Jason Segel's character, where he's like describing his huge drum kit, and it's really kind of bad.
Just
like
5 more pieces and I'll have more than Neil Peart.
It's like not a very good audition.
Yeah, Daly described Franco as always the one that had a Camus novel, heavily dog-eared, and his car was so full of junk, it looks like he lived out of it. I think the wardrobe woman, the costumer, talks about him coming in with a copy of like Kerouac under his arm, just like fully being that guy.
I mean, it's got to be a prop. I mean, I knew so many people like that in school, and I went to NYU in the film department when Franco was going there for whatever program he was there for. And my friends would see him around, and Christy, my girlfriend, used to rent equipment out to him at the film center. And some people had his cell number because it was in the student database thing. So they text him every time there was a party to see if he would come. And he never responded.
Well, they probably dodged a bullet there.
Yeah.
Levine called Franco a bit of a methody hothead type of actor to Page 6. Shouts to my old boss, Lindsay, telling a story about filming a scene for the finale during which Franco, who was fed up with what he felt was insufficient commitment from his fellow actors, called them all bad actors and stormed off the set, slamming a door so hard that it broke. Rogan told Vanity Fair, James would do stuff at times just to push people's buttons. I think he threw milk in someone's face as an improv, and I remember thinking, that's not the best improv.
Imagine that in Seth Rogen's voice.
Anyway.
And then, of course, there's Busy Phillips, who apparently originally auditioned for the role of Lindsay, Linda Cardellini's character. Linda and Busy actually go way back as classmates at Loyola Marymount University. And Busy was initially hesitant about taking on the role of Kim Kelly because her agent told her to wait around for a bigger role. But it was Linda who actually persuaded her to do it. Busy said in an interview with the Huffington Post in 2014, she's the reason why I did Freaks and Geeks, Linda. I wasn't sure if I should do it because my agents were telling me I should hold out for a bigger part on another pilot. And then I ran into Linda at the airport. We were both picking up friends and taking them back to school. And she was like, I just got the part of Lindsay. You have to be Kim. It'll be so much fun. So that's a funny little, imagine if they hadn't run into each other at the airport. So many little like misconnections on this show, or little moments that could have gone the other way, all the way down to the time slot of the show.
Oh God!
Also seen that Lauren Ambrose from Can't Hardly Wait was initially considered for the part of Lindsay, which I can kind of see.
Name rings no bells to me.
Did you ever see Can't Hardly Wait? She was Ethan
I'm
Embry's
sure I
friend.
did at the time, but all I can think of now is the awesome replacement song. No, well.
She's the one who wasn't Jennifer
Pulls
Love
you
Hewitt
uncomfortably close.
Yeah.
Yes. She's the redhead who isn't
Jennifer Love Hewitt.
Stop saying Jennifer Love Hewitt. Moving on. Busy Phillips wrote in her memoir, This Will Only Hurt a Little, that Franco, who's apparently angered by a moment, which, mind you, was written in the script, where her character shoves him, grabbed her by her arms and screamed in my face, "Don't ever touch me again," and shoved her to the ground. They have apparently talked it out since then, but still.
Yeah. She later kind of explained that it was something sort of like a character choice. Like, he created this whole backstory that he didn't share with the rest of the cast. Like that he came from a family that abused him or something, so that he didn't want his girlfriend to ever like physically hit him. And yeah, in this A&E documentary, both Franco and Busy Phillips play it off as like Franco being just, Brando level method acting. But I got the vibe in her memoir that she thought that Franco was basically allowed to get away with all sorts of stuff because it was a boys' club.
Yeah, I mean, Seth Rogen, who has vowed to not work with James Franco again following all these accusations, he said to Vanity Fair that Busy scared me at first. She's just kind of intimidating. She's a little loud and she's kind of physical. She'll punch you and smack you if she doesn't like what you did, as an exclamation. So, I don't know. Maybe he took that the wrong way.
Yeah, Franco said that Busy was tougher than he was.
Franco. Seth Rogen. Speaking of Seth Rogen is Ken Miller. I was 16 in 1998, Rogen told Washington Post. I would do stand-up comedy and smoke a lot of weed and confront the very real fact that I was probably going to fail out of high school relatively soon. I got an agent through doing stand-up comedy to try and audition for things because it seemed like I would need a job one day, and I was not going to get that through my academic path. Freaks and Geeks was the second audition. So he dropped out of high school and started doing the show, but he lied to the production saying that he was doing correspondence school from Canada, and instead he was writing Superbad. Good for him.
Yeah.
Time well spent.
Yeah, Seth's very self-deprecating about his acting abilities at the time. He later said, "A lot of what people attribute to my character choices are just me not understanding what the hell I'm doing. I never acted in anything." Interestingly, Seth Rogen isn't the only cast member who wrote a screenplay while hanging out on the set of Freaks and Geeks. James Franco apparently took Martin Starr, the kid who played Bill, the tall geek, under his wing. We mentioned earlier they went to the studio gym together and worked out. And they apparently also wrote a script together, which is like dark universe Freaks and Geeks. Martin Starr told Vulture, the script was about a kid who goes to school, kills a bunch of people, kills his girlfriend, then kills himself. Me and Franco would walk over to this 24-hour coffee shop 2 blocks from me, and we'd write until 2 a.m. And then he'd try to bequeath unto me his knowledge of life and women and everything else I was curious about. He clearly had a better handle on that than I did. We also talked about going to clubs and beating the hell out of people we deemed pricks. Maybe he was going along with what I felt, but I feel we both had a genuine hatred for what the popular culture was at the time. We were in a dark place, apparently, and we'd sit and write this probably terrible script together while we were drunk. So that's troubling.
Good Lord. Jason Segel as Nick Andopoulos. Nick was originally written as, quote, more of a gearhead car guy. I think he was even described as a fire plug, Feig told Variety.
What is that, like a spark plug?
I think that's what he meant. Isn't fire plug like a... I guess I mean like a scrapper, like a roustabout or something. But when Segel, quote, this big, tall, handsome guy with this interesting delivery and strange personality walked in, Apatow convinced Feig to rewrite the part because of how good Segel was in the audition. At the end of the day, Paul allows that letting Jason Segel walk away would have been a crime. In the documentary about the show, Segel explained that he and Franco were in the waiting room of the audition at the same time on the same day. Franco went in first, he went in second, and they both walked to their cars that day with the gig, which is adorable. And then he said he asked Franco how he saw their chemistry on the show developing. He was like, yeah, would I be the goofy one and you'll be the cool one? And Franco just goes, yeah. that tracks.
Yeah. It's really crazy after weeks of auditions when they couldn't find the right kids. You had Jason Segel, James Franco, and apparently Linda Cardellini all came in on the same day.
Talk about striking gold, man.
Get an astrologer on that one, yeah.
Joe Flaherty as Harold Weir. When we first began, director Brian Gordon told Vanity Fair, Joe Flaherty was the star in everybody's mind. He was the SCTV hero. Segel said, I just watched and learned doing scenes with him. He's so fast. There's a lot of improv on all the stuff we do with Judd. When you're young, you kind of think, I don't know if this old man can keep up. And then you're like, oh, this is the guy who created this style. And of course, Dave Gruber Allen, who plays Jeff Rosso, the guidance counselor who pulls out the guitar. Oh, man, what a tremendous... I love that guy.
The role scares me, though.
You never had a weird guidance counselor like that?
Oh, many, but I just for some. I guess I haven't finished the series yet, but I get like Me Too vibes from him.
It's just like every guidance counselor; they're all a little overreachy. I had one offer to explain divorce to me. I was 15.
Your parents are together.
My parents are together. Well, she was like, she just said that her name had changed, and I guess confusion momentarily registered on my name, and she was like, "I'm getting divorced. Do you know what divorce is?" And I was like, I'm 15, like I'm peripherally aware of the concept.
I was one who asked me what I wanted, like, professionally, just in life, and I waxed poetic for several minutes on the magic of creation and how like it truly is like magic, where there was once an empty page, there is now something that's capable of bringing joy to people and making them laugh or making them think or making them feel something. And I went on and on and on, and then I was done, and he just kind of stared off into space for a minute, and he looked at me and said, "Well, Jordan, you're setting yourself up to be a very poor, hungry man."
Oh, Jesus. Anyway, Dave Gruber Allen was maybe the most prepared for his role because he had actually just come off working in special ed. He was an education aide in Glendale, and he told the Washington Post he had substitutes taught in that same school district. So for me to have that dynamic with high school age kids was easy. I wonder if he pulled out the guitar. I assume he pulled out the guitar. As you meditate on that, we'll be right back with more Too Much Information after these messages.
And then, of course, there are the bit players. Man, they really stack the bench with heavy hitters from some of the most nostalgia-inducing movies of all time. You got the kid who played Squints in The Sandlot, Chauncey Lepardi. He is the bully in the show. You have Thomas F. Wilson, a.k.a. Biff from Back to the Future, as the gym teacher. Joe Flaherty, Sam and Lindsay's dad, also had a bit part at the end of Back to the Future 2 as a Western Union man.
Mm-hmm.
It was Jason Schwartzman, fresh off his role in Rushmore, which... not technically a nostalgia movie, but I kind of count it. Shia LaBeouf, Rashida Jones, Ben Foster in small pre-fame roles, as well as Ben Stiller, who we already mentioned, who was already a star.
And yeah, I mean, really, the show couldn't help but be true to life, since a lot of the cast were basically playing out their adolescence in real time while they were working on this show, albeit, in an era that was 20 years prior. Apatow said, the show is the kid's entire life. It was their high school. They're literally going to school on the set. They're falling in love on the set. It's actually happening. And those relationships are still happening. They're still close.
Aww.
I know. The stuff about how the cast hung out was the most heartwarming part of this to me.
Yeah.
Early on, Judd held a cast meeting. Flowery?
I can't say his name.
Flowery. Cut. Leave all this in. This is gold. This is what you people come to this show for. Early on, Judd held a cast meeting. Flair told Vanity Fair. So stumble on past that. It was something like, just cut every time he's in the story. It was something like, this is your chance right now as actors, but you have to concentrate on the show and don't get caught up in any of this Hollywood stuff. Don't start using drugs because we still have a show to do here. And to their credit, the kids apparently took that to heart. They would bond as a group. They would meet up in their free time to work on their material. Jason Segel told Vanity Fair, we would get the script on a Friday, and Seth and James and I would get together at my house every Sunday without fail and do the scenes over and over and improve them and really think about them. We loved the show, and we took the opportunity really, really seriously. Rogan added, we felt if we made the scenes better on the weekend, if we came in with better jokes, they would film it. And they would. And we didn't know it at the time, but that was completely unindicative of probably every other show that was on television. Given what we know about Apatow and Feig's work since then, it is not shocking that they encouraged improvising. Rogan told Vanity Fair, he had us improvise and rewrote the scripts to what we improvised. We used to... Apatow is this great... Again, I don't think he likes James Franco very much.
No.
Because we used to say 2 out of 10 of Franco's improvs are good, but those 2 are just historic. Heigl told the LA Times that Apatow helped encourage him to write Forgetting Sarah Marshall by tapping into that spirit. There was a lot of improv on Freaks, he said, and he said to me, if you can improv like this, then you can write. Cardellini said, we used to go over to Jason's house. He would have everybody over. She's talking to TV Guide. We had lots of mutual friends, people doing shows that were near where we were. I was still in college, and I lived with a bunch of college roommates, so we would have people over to our house, too. I remember having people over for Christmas parties. It's really fun when you work with funny people, because then you really are around some of the brightest, funniest minds, and sitting there cracking jokes with them is fun. Busy Phillips added in that same feature, we all got along and hung out, especially like the freaks, Jason and Linda and Seth and me. We would go to Jason's apartment and hang out after work, or we'd go to Swingers and get breakfast burritos at like 11 at night.
Oh, I do love that.
Yeah.
And there were moments from the table read that were ad-libbed that were then incorporated into the script. There's a scene where Lindsay's uptight friend Millie asks her if she knows what Busy Phillips's character gets up to in the yearbook darkroom. Answer, I can't even say this with a straight face. She fornicates it. It was a typo in the script, but the actress playing her didn't know what fornicate means, so she delivered it the way it was written anyway. And there's footage of this in that documentary I mentioned. The entire cast just dies when she says it. And Jason Segel is really cute, can see that she is confused while everyone's laughing, and he very sweetly leans over and clues her in, like, oh, there shouldn't be an it there, that's wrong. But you can see she still doesn't get it, and it's adorable. But yeah, that line made it into the script, that typo.
I worked with this rock camp for like elementary school kids once. I guess some of them were middle school, and they wanted to do Californication. And I think we went through and like took out like the line out porn stars or something, but they were singing the chorus, and the woman who ran the camp like pulled me out upset. She was like, you can't have them say that. And I was like, say, and an idiot. I was like, say what? She was like, fornication. It's in the chorus. And I was like, I don't think these kids know what that means. So then I had to explain it to them, which you could see them turning it over in their minds like, oh. And I was like, just make sure you're really enunciating it when you sing. So you're saying Californication, like a vacation. And I was like, the damage has been done.
Oh, so you
like,
made it worse, calling attention to it, yeah.
The kids' dynamic would play out on the set in interesting ways and make it into the show. Daly and Cardellini would rib each other like they were real life brother and sister, even when they weren't on camera.
Yeah, Daly said in the Vanity Fair piece, I probably had a bit of a crush on her too, which you don't want to hear when you're playing brother and sister, but it's hard not to have a crush on Linda Cardellini.
Yeah, and, he probably used some of that as fuel for his interactions with Jason Segel, because Jason Segel and Linda Cardellini were actually dating. They dated for several years. And when Forgetting Sarah Marshall came out, he was fielding questions about whether or not it was his breakup with Linda Cardellini that inspired that movie. This is to the LA Times in 2008. I found an interview. He said, I was still very much a child then, and this was more of an amalgamation of a lot of different relationships and breakups that I've had. People are bound to talk, but Linda was a great girlfriend. Which is so sweet. And then because of the trio of Daly and Starr and Levine, basically that two of them would pair off and hang out while the other one was unavailable. And then that would forge like resentments that always happens when someone's the odd person out in friendship. And that would inform their dynamic. And Daly also told Vulture, any girl we got to do a scene with, we all fell in love with her at some point or another. I recall there being a lot of tension between the geeks over the girls, constantly. There was a girl both Martin and Sam liked, and I guess Sam said something to her that was embarrassing to Martin, so Martin resented Sam for certain things. Sam resented Martin for certain things. I resented them both for being able to drive. There were a lot of civil wars going on. I love that.
Oh, man. I mean, obviously the chemistry of the cast is a crucial component of the show's success, but the secret ingredient, as we mentioned at the top of the episode, is trauma, damn it. Yes, the willingness of the writers to plumb the depths of their souls, to excavate the most painful childhood memories and humiliations, that's truly what made this show tick. And hopefully it was cathartic for them to share these stories, because, as we talked about earlier, more often than not, other people watching had similar tales of woe. Busy Phillips had a faux pitch for this show in one of the interviews, which I thought was really funny. Tune in every week. We're going to show you a version of events that you probably went through in high school. We're going to help you laugh about it. You might catch some feelings about it. And at the end of the day, maybe it'll help us move on from the pain of high school. Which, honestly, they should have just used that as, like, the ad pitch. Maybe the show would have lasted more than one season. Some of the best-loved moments on the show were taken directly from the lives of the writers and creators. For Judd Apatow, the most poignant, and he says the most personal scene it has ever done, is the scene where Bill comes home from school, and he's being raised by a single mom, and he's basically a latchkey kid. He lets himself into the house, takes a few Kraft singles out of an otherwise empty fridge, and starts making a grilled cheese sandwich. And he looks extremely lonely. And The Who's I'm One from Quadrophenia is playing in the background with Pete Townsend singing mournful lines like, every year is the same and I feel it again, I'm a loser, no chance to win. And then the triumphant chorus kicks in just as Bill settles in front of the TV and starts watching Gary Shandling doing stand-up on the Dinah Shore Show. And he's just laughing away the pain and loneliness of being a kid and also the pain of not having a dad. And Judd Apatow said this was very much his experience as a kid growing up in a divorced household where these comedians more or less became his friends. I think he went on to work with Gary Shandling too. The funny thing about shooting this scene is that they got the kid playing Bill to laugh by having Judd Apatow and another writer stand just behind the camera telling just incredibly dirty, aristocrat level dirty jokes. And I guess they did the same thing on the episode where Sam watches a porn and gets freaked out by sex. So he goes to his gym teacher, and the gym teacher takes him into his office and gives him what we can't hear, but we imagine to be a very graphic lowdown. And John Francis Daly's face just goes from bewilderment to laughter and back again over the course of 90 seconds. But the actor playing the gym teacher, Thomas F. Wilson, is just telling him dirty jokes all the time to get these different facial responses.
I thought it was because he didn't think Gary Shandling was funny. He was like, I'm supposed to be laughing at this.
Oh, well, maybe that's part of it too. But like, yeah. Another incident ripped from the personal lives of these poor creators. Paul Feig admitted that the whole being freaked out by the mechanics of sex after seeing a porn way too young thing was something that actually occurred in his life. And so did another scene showing the pain of being a late bloomer. The bit where the school's making kids take showers after gym class and Sam doesn't want to get naked in front of his friends at school, which I find to be a totally reasonable thing. I have no memory of people at my school using the showers after gym class.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I never broke a sweat in gym because I just stood there and hoped the ball never came to me. I think I usually rigged it so that it was like the last class of the day for me too. But yeah, no, I don't remember that being a thing at my school. An unusually smelly school, I guess. But yeah, Paul Feig was forced to take a shower, and it was only marginally less traumatic than Sam getting locked out of the locker room naked. He told the AV Club, when I finally got forced to take a shower, when I finally went in, all the guys were playing soap hockey. They were all running around nude. It was the weirdest thing. And when they saw me, they knew I didn't want to take a shower, and they all tackled me. They all dogpiled on top of me nude. It was the most traumatic thing I've ever been through in my life. We knew early on we couldn't do that on the show because you'd be arrested for shooting a scene like that. So that's when it kind of morphed into a scene where when Sam finally does it, they make him run around nude. That was the TV acceptable version of what we could do.
That's horrifying.
Yeah, across the board, yeah. Paul Feig is also responsible for the opening of the Halloween episode where the geeks are gathered around the kitchen table with all sorts of disgusting food items in a blender, and Bill says, I'll eat anything for $10.
Did you never do that in middle school?
No!
Oh, dude, we had the disgusting contest all the time. You would just take the garbage pizza and liquefied peaches, all that crap that you're allowed to serve kids, and just like mash it into one thing and then just like try and get each other to eat it. I can't believe you never did that.
No, I was never. No, I was more into like
chocolate milk and mashed potatoes and then you grind it into a paste and be like, eat this. Turkey, peas, just I guess I'm remembering a very specific Thanksgiving meal.
Yeah, I was gonna say
it's usually grosser than that. Pixie sticks, like sprinkle sugar in there to make it even more disgusting.
Oh God.
Yeah, then just send them running for the bathroom when they couldn't hold it down.
How did you fare doing that? Or were you the one instigating
I was the instigator.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Or I made the concoction. I was never the person eating it. But surely you know me better than that by now.
No, true. Yes. But I guess Paul Feig, much like John Francis Daley, he believed in Santa until he was fairly old. And the year that he found out that Santa wasn't real, he got so mad that he thought, man, if it's Dad, I'm going to screw him over. I'm going to leave him something other than milk. I'm going to make him this terrible toxic brew for my dad that'll taste awful and make him throw up. And he's telling the story to the AV Club. So I started doing that stuff with a blender. I'm putting all this stuff in, thinking it was really fun. And then I just started crying in the middle of it because it smelled so terrible. And I was like, what am I doing to my dad? So that was the origin of mixing in a bunch of crap into the blender.
Mm-hmm.
And then I mentioned this at the top of the episode, the final scene of the pilot when Sam dances with his crush to Styx's Come Sail Away is based on a moment that occurred with Judd Apatow when he delayed asking a girl to dance until the very day of said dance. Obviously, the lucky lady had a date at this point, but just like Cindy Sanders in Freaks and Geeks, she offered to save Judd a dance. But unfortunately, Judd waited until well after the slow song had already started to work up the courage to ask this girl to dance. He said it was Human Nature by Michael Jackson. And, you know, as I said, the only songs that are safe to dance to if you're socially inept and actually can't dance are the slow songs. But by the time he actually got up to her and asked her to dance, the song was over in like 30 seconds. And then they switched to something up-tempo like Boogie Nights, and he had to just go run for cover. As he later said, it was one of the most embarrassing moments of my high school career, and I was sad I didn't get to slow dance. For the show, they were trying to get Stairway to Heaven, which I've personally been humiliated during.
That would have been
occasions.
real bad for you.
That would have been real bad. Yeah. Oh, I've told this story several times on the show. I was more or less dumped on the dance floor because my dancing was so terrible.
It happens.
Yeah. Well, but they couldn't afford Led Zeppelin, so they were gonna go with Jay Giles' Southside Shuffle, which I don't really understand. But then they came up with Come Sail Away after they submitted a personal request to Dennis DeYoung from Styx.
But didn't they did that with New? I mean, we'll get to the music, but like, how many handwritten letters were they wheedling from these classic rock icons? This had like the little matchstick girl just like chained to a desk writing like, "Please, Billy Joel, can I use this?
Can I please
side
Rosalind's
3?
eyes?" Yeah.
Yeah, can I use this side 3 deep cut in this television show?" Feig's over cracking the whip like, "Now do Neil. Now write Dennis DeYoung. Put your tears into it." That's a fun bit. Continuing. The test.
Oh, yeah, this is great. There's at the end of the episode where Lindsay helps James Franco cheat and gets caught. She wants to tell the truth and admit it. And James Franco tells this heartfelt sob story that wins her over about, you know what it's like being called dumb when you're 11 years old. It's really like, and as I was watching this episode, I texted you in the middle of that scene being like, Jesus Christ, this show goes hard. Yeah. And then when they're in the disciplinary committee meeting, he tells the identical sob story to the assembled crew of administrators. And Lindsay realizes that it's all an act and she's been conned, and she starts to laugh hysterically. And I texted you, oh.
And, you watched it happen live.
Yeah. Franco's approach, this impassioned speech, is, I guess, based on something that Owen Wilson once did. I guess he told Judd Apatow that he'd gotten in trouble for something similar in high school. Maybe not high school, but at some point in school. And to get out of it, he just started to pretend to cry in the office. It's like really exaggerated sobbing.
It's a good way to diffuse people being mad at you. I mean,
at that age, yeah, hell yeah. I'm kind of amazed I never did that. I was never in trouble
age,
was the problem, yeah.
At any age. Try it at home, kids and adults. Next time someone's mad at you, just start weeping.
They say we don't have any take-home value for this show.
Yeah, that's if this gets canceled, I'm pivoting to an influencer. Capitalizing on the clout I have amassed, giving people bad advice in the context of a pop culture podcast. The Kegger next.
Oh yes, this is one of my favorite scenes. It's from the second episode where Lindsay and Sam's parents, the Weirs, go out of town, and Lindsay lets the freaks throw a party at their house, but Sam and the Geeks switch out the keg with non-alcoholic beer. That's such a brilliant plot point. I thought it was surely just a goofy comedic premise, but apparently it's based on a real incident where the awesomely named writer on the show, J. Elvis Weinstein, he switched the kegs at a party in high school because he basically wanted to make people look stupid. He told TV Guide, "My idea was much more sort of a Catcher in the Rye sort of thing, and then everyone's a phony. And we wanted to do this experiment where we entrap them at a party, but enough people brought their own liquor that the experiment failed." And the funny thing is, the kid who played Bill, the geek, Martin Starr, who, the guy who was off writing
snuff films with Franco.
Working out the gym with him. He apparently arrived hours late to the shoot because he had been working on a short film with some USC film kids the night before and been out partying, even though he was like 16. And this was the first episode that they were shooting after the pilot was picked up. And Judd Apatow was pissed. He was so mad that this kid was late that they threatened to replace him with the kid who played the geek guru Harris, who's
said it on the set. He said it to Daly and Levine. He was like, "I hope you guys like acting with this other person." Judd Apatow does not come across especially well in a lot of those oral histories. He just sounds like he was like having shouting matches all the time, and just like, I think Feig says later on, Judd was a screamer.
Yeah, he was a screamer.
Yeah.
The beer they used in that scene was apparently cream soda, which all the kids had to pound. And Linda Cardellini later said, "Afterwards, I was sick to my stomach. I don't think I've had a cream soda since. I haven't had a cream soda in 20 years.
Oh, I love Linda Cardellini.
I know
as you said, impossible to not fall in love with her. All right, as we alluded to earlier, my favorite part of this, the music.
Mm-hmm.
This show's banana. The music cues to this nuts.
Yeah,
insane. Just and from the outset, from Siegel's character's Rush obsession and his subsequently heart-punchingly depressing audition for a local band. That's the part I identify with the most. To the scene in which he and Millie duet on "Jesus Is Just All Right With Me." Feig wanted music baked into the show's DNA. Part of the Bible that he prepared as the show's omnibus included a list of bands with the note, "This is a freak band, this is a geek band, or this is a band they both would like." Let's do a little lightning round, Jordan.
Yes.
You name a band, and I'll see if I can get it in one of those three buckets.
Okay, here we go. Ready?
Yeah.
All right, this is from Paul Feig's show Bible. The categories are, is it freaks, is it geeks, or is it freaks and geeks? Okay. Wings. Paul McCartney and Wings.
Oh, geeks.
And some freaks.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. Meatloaf.
Both?
Just geeks.
That doesn't scan to me.
I know, right? It seems pretty freaks to me, yeah. Genesis.
Yeah, if you smoked weed at any point in your life, you have picked up Bat Out of Hell and been like, this cover rules. I gotta check this out. Genesis, geeks.
Freaks.
Although this is, because I lied. This is Peter Gabriel. This is Lamb Lies Down on Broadway era,
Yeah,
so it
this
would have
is
been all
not-
the
yeah.
prog, all the
Yeah,
prog dorks. All right.
This one's a tricky one. Fleetwood
I'm
Mac.
whiffing. Both. I am sucking at this. Holy
it's geeks and freak girls, it specifies.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sure.
Okay, let's see. Oh, this one's easy. Blue Oyster Cult.
Oh, yeah. Freaks. Blue Oyster Cult shreds.
This one, okay, The Police.
Freaks?
It says freaks and a few geeks, which surprised me.
80 would have been like, when did they really break?
79, I want to say.
Okay.
So they're very new. Yeah.
Keep going.
Jackson Brown.
That's got to be geeks.
And freaks who smoke a lot of pot.
Oh, yeah, that tracks.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because Police Don't Stand So Close to Me was 1980 in September. So,
Okay.
yeah, that they would have had geek appeal, whatever. Keep going.
Bob Seger.
Oh, freaks.
Geeks, some freaks. I challenge that. That
So do
seems
I.
off to me.
Come the
Yeah.
on,
Yeah,
dude.
yeah.
Especially in Michigan.
Right. Yes. Yes.
You're
Yes.
like,
Yes. Elvis Costello.
Oh, that's got to be geeks.
Moody
Right?
geeks, some freaks.
Okay.
B-52s.
Geeks.
Nobody.
Well
leave it
played,
there.
sir.
We'll leave it there.
When you're a teenager, especially, whatever songs are your favorite songs become the soundtrack to your life. Feig told Consequence, formerly Consequence of Sound. When you just call it Consequence, it sounds weird. So I knew I really wanted to make that an integral part and wrote a lot of the cues into the actual script. Some of which changed, actually. Long and short, music was always going to be very integral to it. and always something that I wanted us to write into the script so we could mold scenes around the actual songs when possible. You know why it is people stop getting interested in new music? It's like basically the same reason that you keep flashing all your stress dreams are high school based. It's because like your brain is so squirted full of chemicals throughout puberty that everything is just like imprinted in a way that you can never truly escape. And then as you get older, your brain develops and starts blocking mood swings generated by the amygdala, meaning you literally feel things less intensely. So that's why as you get older, if you're like, I don't like new music, it's because you are literally biologically incapable of caring about anything as much as you did when you were a teenager.
Was that my dinner with Andre thing?
Oh yeah, when I was 20 or whatever, all I cared about was art and music. Now I'm 36 and all I think about is money. Yes, that. It's also my favorite tweet of all time, which is it's a woman talking about a scene at a date, and the tweet is basically what I just said, which is like, and so as we get older, our prefrontal cortex develops and blocks mood swings generated by the amygdala, which makes it literally harder to feel about things the way we once did. And then date. So you don't like your pasta? Me. I'm saying I don't like anything, Greg. Anyway, yeah, they spent like a third of the budget on this show as the music rights.
I believe it. Oh my God, yeah, probably more. I mean, this is another thing that set the show apart from other sitcoms. It was rare for network shows to have these classic songs in every single episode. And, you know, in a sense, it's another one of the big things that linked it to the Wonder Years. It was really the last one that had so many hits in every episode. But even those, they were kind of used a bit more sparingly. They took a lot of inspiration from the cinema world, too. Stuff by like Hal Ashby, like Harold and Maude, where they use Cat Stevens and all the Scorsese needle drops. And it's also been noted in a lot of music-centric think pieces on Freaks and Geeks that 1980 is a weird time in music. Music had basically splintered into subgenres: disco, punk, new wave, and heavy metal. So the choices could be all over the place, and they would all fit. So it gives it a lot of, you know, unique styles. The theme, of course, is Joan Jett's bad reputation. But, you know, they almost went with Ted Nugent's Great White Buffalo, because Paul Feig liked the opening guitar riff.
Yeah, I mean, that also scans because Nugent was in Amboy Dukes, right?
Yeah.
So he was like a Michigan guy as well.
Oh, right. Huh.
I don't think we've mentioned this, but it's set in Paul Feig's hometown, right? Like outside of like a Michigan suburb.
I think it's a fictitious town, I think, but it's supposed to be. Yeah.
Both Feig and Apatow came by their love of music honestly. Feig played guitar and drums growing up, and he saved up to buy himself a multi-track Tascam recorder that he used to make like parody songs and comedy skits in his basement. I didn't know this. Apatow's grandfather was a record producer named Bobby Shad, who produced the first Janis Joplin record.
Yeah, he was a big deal. He knows a lot about music, Judd Apatow. He once tweeted one of my Rolling Stone stories.
Oh,
it was really special. Yeah.
That's great. I would love to talk to him about that.
There's a great story of I think he told on like Seth Meyers or something about how he's like me when it comes to the Beatles, like, you know, like most people when it comes to the Beatles, but he just worships them. And he met Paul McCartney at like some stage door after some show or something, and he's talking to him, and they're actually like hitting it off and having a conversation. And Judd is so emboldened by how well things are going that I think he asks for Paul's number, and then Paul just recoils and puts his hand up like, whoa. And somebody took a picture, like some paparazzi or something took a picture of this moment of Paul McCartney of it visibly recoiling at Judd Apatow, and then like when he's telling the story in Seth Meyers, they like project it up on the screen.
That's so funny. The kids, however, on the show, most of them were pretty out of step with all of this. Martin Starr told Consequence the first album he bought with his own money was Tupac. Martin Starr told Consequence the first album he bought with his own money was Tupac's All Eyes on Me. Busy Phillips name dropped bands like The Promise Ring and Modest Mouse, Tori Amos and Fiona Apple. But
Solid.
Daly, John Francis Daly, was in The Who's Tommy when he was 9 years old. He played young Tommy in the national tour of the stage musical.
Whoa.
Apatow said, "My memory tells me that it was somewhat shocking how little many of them knew about Led Zeppelin." And Paul Feig organized a field trip for the kids to go see Ted Nugent at the House of Blues, because he was like, this is what your characters are listening to. Both of them are obsessive Styx fans, which I find very funny. Like deep Styx, not just the hits.
Mr. Apatow, yeah.
First time I went to New Orleans, I got a cab driver who drove me to the airport coming back, and he saw that my bag of records, and he was like, "Oh yeah, you like music?" I was like, "Uh-oh." And he's, first of all, not like a real cab, just like a dude in a car who clearly worked for some kind of livery service, just like overflowing ashtray of butts, and just like pops open the glove and pulls out a spindle, like a full spindle of burned live Styx bootlegs, and for the next 25 minutes just skipped around to different eras of live Styx, playing me Styx deep cuts.
Are we talking like back prime era, like late 70s, early 80s, or are these like
literally 70s? Yeah, 70s to 2000s.
That's cool, I guess.
And being like, oh yeah, he's like, well, right around 2005, they got this new drummer, really gave him a shot in the arm. Like, you gotta check out this recording of. It's just like, all right, bud. You know we're in New Orleans, right? Like, not this kind of music. Anyway, Sam Levine told Consequence that he bragged to Apatow and Feig that they wouldn't have to worry about his taste because he fancied himself a classic rock aficionado. And they parried by asking him if he knew about the record Hocus Pocus by the Dutch prog rock band Focus. And he did not. Are you familiar with Focus?
It's in my dad's record collection of stuff he had in college that has not been removed from the milk crates that he had.
Have you heard that song? The one where they do the yodeling that goes into a flute breakdown? And to this day, Levine said, I haven't returned his copy of Focus 2. I have no idea where it might be, but I know I definitely never gave it back. That kid actually also successfully lobbied for White Room by Cream to make it into an episode that already had 2 other Cream songs in it.
Well, it was perfect. It's the episode where the kids are forced to take a shower in gym class, and the shower was just a big room of gleaming white tiles. Great needle drop.
I mean, first time I heard that song was in the old iMac commercials.
I don't remember that.
It was for the white one, yeah.
I remember She's a Rainbow by the Stones was the first time I heard that song, and they had all the colorful IMAX. That was a great song. It was a great ad, the little ballet of IMAX.
Yeah, I think they had one for every different color, and the needle drops were all different. Anyway, music supervisor Buck Damon told Consequence that most of the classic rock bands they approached were pretty open to having their music used for the show, with the 2 big exceptions to that being Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd. You ask Led Zeppelin for anything, Jimmy Page just holds out his hand. Doesn't even make eye contact with you. They were, in fact, able to secure a first ever TV sync from Billy Joel for Rosalinda's Eyes.
I keep seeing that like cited everywhere as like a big deal. Like, that's not.
You're a Billy Joel guy. Was it?
I don't know. It's not one of my favorites. I don't think it's a big song. It is. I mean, it's cool. Wasn't Vienna used in Cheers? Oh no, Taxi. It was an episode of Taxi. That was what it was. An equally great ensemble cast show.
All right, well, get your together, Consequence. I read that in your article. Do a little fact checking. Consequence of inaccuracy, more like it. No, it's a great piece.
It was a good piece, yeah. It's worth noting that music supervisors Buck Damon and Amanda Shear Demi also worked on the epic soundtrack to Garden State, as well as Mean Girls. I don't know where else to put this, but the scene where Jason Segel's character Nick does his Saturday Night Fever style disco dance, that was actually choreographed by the person who did the real John Travolta's dance on Saturday Night Fever.
That's awesome.
Right?
That they brought him out of, well, I guess he probably wasn't retired. Anyway, oh man, like we mentioned earlier, that apparently they wrote a lot of personal appeals to different musicians to get these songs secured, and they wanted to get Neil Young's Only Love Can Break Your Heart for the scene. That's the scene where Bill confronts his dad. We sent it off for clearance, Judd Apatow said. We heard that he watched it on the tour bus and that he gave us approval. And while we were editing the episode, we were canceled. So at that point, we didn't know if the show would ever air, and it was an expensive cue. So I had to decide if I wanted to pay for it out of my own pocket. The studio said, we're not going to put a super expensive song in when you don't even have a network anymore. Several times in my life, I wake up with my heart racing, thinking not paying for that song was one of the stupidest creative decisions I ever made. They ended up going with Dean Martin's You're Nobody Till Somebody Loves You, which is also equally tragic in that. But admirably, Apatow did not give up when the show came out on home media. He said, we asked Neil Young if we could put it in the show when we got the deal to release it on DVD, and he said no. I don't know why. I literally was hunting down anybody who might know him. I was talking to personal trainers. I guess he was over us at that point. Lindsay's decision to become a deadhead and follow the band around the country was literally a spur-of-the-moment decision made by Apatow and Feig after hearing mid-season rumblings that their show was in trouble. I think they were at a Rodney Dangerfield stand-up show in Vegas, if I'm remembering the anecdote correctly, and they were talking about how they might not have had a show. And so Apatow was like, yeah, you should film the season finale now, to make sure that they had a satisfying ending for the show, even if they didn't get the full season order. So the dead thing came more from Apatow, who remembered the kids disappearing from Long Island, where he grew up, for months at a time to follow the band and then turning back up. And Feig grew up in, I think he did grow up in Detroit, but he said he really only heard the Dead like on FM radio, like Sugar Magnolia and stuff. But he apparently listened to American Beauty over and over again while he was writing the finale. Great record. And he wound up really connecting with Box of Rain and Ripple, both of which the band gave their approval to use in the show. Box of Rain, song about Phil Lesh's dad dying. He told Consequence, I knew I wanted Box of Rain to be her, Linda's, epiphany song. And I remember when we showed the first cut of it to the writers, a couple of people in the writers' room were just laughing. Like, oh my God, this is so cringy. Watching this girl just start dancing to the album. And I was like, yeah, but we're all cringy at that age. When you discover something, you just get into it more and more. Which is true. Yeah. Thank God there's not footage of me being into bands and like visibly reacting the first time I heard Rancid, or Tom Waits for that matter,
or Annette Coleman.
I have to stop myself from doing the Marvin Berry thing at every juncture. Your cousin, Ornette Berry. They did, in fact, force Jason Segel to learn how to play the drums. Although he's a musical dude. I love his Vampire Dracula he puts together in Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Do you like that movie? I feel like that might hit some of your...
I saw it years ago. I feel weird about him because somebody once said that I reminded them of him. And so now whenever I see him, I just see things I don't like about myself.
Oh, he's like universally beloved. Nobody has anything bad to say about Jason Segel. Anyway, unfortunately, with such high-profile music, rights issues meant that many of the songs in Freaks and Geeks were not available in the international versions of the show. So they got composer Michael Andrews, yes, the Donnie Darko guy, who did the show's original score, to do these temp replacement sound-alike versions for the international releases. But since so much of the show was built around these specific songs, they didn't want to put it out on home media without the actual syncs that they intended. Apatow told Consequence, when we started getting offers to put it out, the problem was always like, but we can't pay for the music. We're going to have to put out with those international sound cues, with the replacement songs. And I was like, nope, we can't do it. Feig said we just kept turning it down. For 4 years, these things would pop up and it'd be like, nope, we can't do it. Not worth it. We don't want it. Good for them for sticking to their guns. That is incredible. Eventually, Shout Factory ponied up and released the show on DVD with the original music intact, as did Hulu when the show arrived on the streamer.
Before it was on DVD, weren't like bootleg copies going on eBay for absurd amounts of money for fans, like hundreds of dollars?
I didn't see that, but that's scans. They did. We'll get into the fans for this show later.
Yeah, the fans shelled out. But yeah, this was the same problem with the Wonder Years. That's why the Wonder Years wasn't available on streaming for the longest time, and it wasn't available on DVD until 2014.
Quick reminder, the entertainment industry is making it up at all times. So I'm sure they were like, streaming? How does that work? DVD home releases, there's going to be home... You're telling me there's going to be a home media? In the Consequence interview, Feig stressed that he didn't want the sound or the look of the show to be reminiscent of that 70s show, the broad comedic hit at the time that he felt cherry-picked kind of the most absurd things of the 70s.
Yeah, the jokes were basically like, perms are funny, leisure suits are funny. And like I said at the top of the episode, that was sort of the reason why I never wanted to watch Freaks and Geeks in the first place. I thought it was a similar vibe about just like stoners being goofy. And
I hate that show, dude. I hate everyone who's involved in it. I don't understand, except for Red.
Red, yeah.
Anyway, he explained of the wardrobe, or the outfits they wore on that 70s show were definitely worn back then, but that wasn't what everybody wore. So it was very important to me. With wardrobe, I got all my old yearbooks and I went through them and I said, here's how we dressed. We didn't all wear platform shoes and leisure suits and have our hair feathered with puka shells. Burnouts dressed in army clothes and jeans. It was more 60s oriented still. To that end, wardrobe designer Deborah McGuire, who also worked on Friends around the same time, thrifted everything for the show. Nothing on it was designer or bespoke. It was funny because I remember pulling the rack of vintage clothes for the fitting and thinking, these are the ugliest clothes I've ever seen in my life, she told the clothing website High Snobiety. Like, it was just ugly, she says. It was like the Midwest threw up. I hated it. That said, she said the cast loved it. Each actor would come into their fitting and go, oh my God, I love this. I want it. And that's when you realize there's so much about fashion and trends that is so psychological in terms of what you're used to seeing, what you've never seen, what looks fresh, and what looks new. These kids had never seen clothes that looked like this before. McGuire echoes the other cast and crew members' reminiscences that Franco went above and beyond for his role. He flew to Paul Feig's hometown of Mount Clemens, there it is, Michigan, to walk around and see what the houses look like, to see what the people were like, and to go to the thrift stores and what the clothing was like. He found pieces there that he thought would be interesting to bring back for the character. I think she mentions that he had a copy of On the Road.
I think you're right, yeah.
To achieve a unified look across the show's range of characters who occupied a broad strata of economic classes and cultural backgrounds, McGuire took an interesting tack. My idea was to over-dye all of the wardrobe to give the whole piece a tone. Literally every single piece of clothing went into an over-dye that was either gray or brown. Gross.
She was also working on the show Friends at the time, which I find really hilarious. She said, I got the schizophrenic life going on. I got actors on Friends who don't give a damn about you. And then you go over to the show Freaks and Geeks where the kids are like sitting on your lap, hugging you, and are so happy to see you. The energy was completely different. It was just such a wonderful place to be, and it was inspiring all the time. Oh.
And then it all came crashing down.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more Too Much Information in just a moment.
So, after we talk about all the things that this show does well and how much of a fun time everyone had working on it and so on and so forth, the sad end that everyone knew was coming. Obviously, it was canceled, not even halfway through. Anyway, a number of things conspired against it. It was a critical hit. It has an 88 on Metacritic and 100% on Rotten Tomatoes still. Garnered 3 Emmy nominations, 1 for casting. NBC debuted it at 8 p.m. on a Saturday. Not a historically strong time slot.
Yeah, this had to be because a new network president or somebody hated the show and wanted to see it die on the vine, right? I mean, because no one programs stuff on Saturday nights. It's dead air. Especially a show that's meant for young people who would almost certainly be out with their friends on Saturday nights. So, yeah. It doesn't make any sense.
I mean, the shenanigans hardly stopped there. There was a 3-week gap between episodes 2 and 3 because of the World Series. Baseball. I don't know. Do people not know about what the World Series are? Anyway, yeah. So 3 consecutive weeks for that. And then it was put on hold until early January. So not in November or December. Aired once in February, twice in March, and then canceled. And then the final 2 episodes aired in July. 6 episodes were never aired from the original run. At one point, they put it up against Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which is rude. Nothing was going to beat Millionaire at that point. And then they just, it just felt like started to feel personal.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah. Which is why years later, Judd Apatow and the whole cast really like go out of their way to like name names when it comes to talking about why the show died.
They very much do.
Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was getting about 18 million viewers an episode, and Freaks and Geeks getting, I think at its peak, 7 million, and then it was just a slow drop off from there. Eventually, it was the lowest rated show on the network. Ultimately replaced by a game show, a reboot of the 50s show 21, All this is hilarious to me because that 7 million figure would be considered a decent sized hit now for network TV.
Right? Yeah. Oh, and then the Mary and Rhoda reunion show, which is an ABC made-for-TV movie sequel to the Mary Tyler Moore show that ran opposite the 10th episode of Freaks and Geeks. Really the nail in the coffin there. Surely insulting.
In other words, they were off the air 13 out of the 26 weeks that it ran. And when it did run, the scheduling was so inconsistent that it was just impossible
to be unwatchable.
follow. Yeah.
And I mean, they didn't take it sitting down either. I mean, they created a website that would tell people when Freaks and Geeks was airing. And NBC didn't want to share the URL for it in any of its ads. They were worried because they were worried about the internet. Apatow told NME they didn't want people to know the internet existed. They were worried about losing viewers to it.
The ratings for the first episode, like I said, were okay. And at the next taping, Paul Feig got up on a table in the cafeteria set and gathered everyone around and read out the ratings and was very proud. And then after that, the numbers just nosedived. And Joe Flaherty, the guy who plays the Weir's dad, later said, yeah, after that, Paul didn't gather everyone around and read the ratings anymore. He just took that as a sign. And Judd Apatow told Vanity Fair, I thought, if we can't beat the 10th season of Cops, we don't deserve to be on the air. And then, of course, Cops kicked our ass. It's also worth noting that most of these episodes were aired out of sequence, which totally killed any sense of a linear narrative. And probably the most crucial example of this is the episode Kim Kelly is My Friend, which actually wasn't aired originally, but it was a major turning point for Lindsay and Kim's relationship, Kim being Busy Phillips's character. Kim is, in the first couple episodes, horrible to basically everyone, but especially Lindsay. But then Lindsay meets her family and discovers that she comes from a really abusive household, and they bond, and the whole dynamic of their relationship changes. The audience sees her in a completely different light. They see why she is the way she is. The network just thought this episode was too intense, which, to be fair, it's a really intense bit of television. But without that episode, Kim is just mean. So, without airing sequentially, you wouldn't know why these characters are now relating completely differently with each other, and you won't get to see these characters in a way that help you relate to them and connect to them.
And we mentioned the other dominant strain of teen-oriented television at the time was stuff like Dawson's Creek, which came back to bite Freaks and Geeks because incoming president at NBC was a guy named Garth Ensier, who came from the WB. And he told production that he had been to boarding school in Princeton, and he, quote, didn't understand public school. Just let that sink in.
On that A&E documentary about the making of Freaks and Geeks, I forget if it was Seth Rogen or Jason Segel, but one of them just goes, what kind of name is Garth?
Yeah, I mean, that, good Lord, that is... grant me God grant me the confidence of a white man who would just stride into something and announce that was why he didn't get public school because of his background at boarding school in Princeton. Ugh. Yeah, well, that's enough about him. The show's tone was not a fit to the dominant tone of high school shows at the time. Apatow told the Washington Post, we didn't get a ton of notes, but the spirit of the notes we did get was, don't make it sad, don't make the kids suffer as much, give the kids more victories.
To which Judd Apatow would respond that this was a show about failing, but how you survive those failures and how your friends are always there for you when you fail. But there were some really classic notes, like one of them was, please revise Ken and Amy's banter about a tuba being the only thing she can blow. And also, please take another pass at revisiting Bill's touching story about the time he, quote, tried to sneak out a fart, but it came out of poop and I had to flush my undies down the toilet. I forget where I saw these. I think they're in the documentary. They show like old inter-network memos of notes from censors and the network executives. They wanted to give more time to James Franco's character because, he obviously had heartthrob potential. And they also wanted to throw in a few more happy endings. But as one of the producers observed, have you ever seen a show that was failing suddenly turn it all around due to network executive notes?
Yeah. Consequently, the battles intensified. Gabe Sachs told The Guardian, Whoever was in charge at the time didn't quite understand what we were trying to do. They'd ask things like, when is Sam going to make out with a cheerleader? And this is when the Apatow just kind of dug his heels in. Feig told Vanity Fair, Judd was a screamer back then. He would take them on hardcore. But this all manifested in increasingly depressing ways. There's a pretty brutal quote by Jason Segel. He said, we didn't really have to be told we were being canceled. We watched the craft service table. It started out with like cold cuts and delicious snacks, and it was reduced to half a thing of creamer and some corn pops by the end. Sam Levine recalled that he said Judd's phone would ring and he would walk 20 feet away and he'd be pacing on the phone for 40 minutes. And I remember thinking, that can't be a good phone call.
Another telling sign was when the cast reportedly got a float in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade a few months after the show premiered, and no one knew who they were, and they were just summarily booed by a crowd of New Yorkers.
God.
I guess their float was lame, too. It was a giant watering can.
Okay.
No.
Good job, NBC promotional department. Apatow recalled saying, we were saying to the network, we need a full season, 22 episodes to attract an audience. And the order wouldn't come, and I would just rant and rave. It was like begging your parents not to get divorced, trying to save the show.
Yeah, considering his family history, it got pretty primal for him. His parents were divorced. He would later say trying to keep the show together was basically his way of trying to keep his family together at all costs, and all the depression and despair and rage that brings.
An episode... This is a great one. An episode in which Rogan's girlfriend explains to him that she has ambiguous genitalia, which is inspired by an episode of Howard Stern that Apatow had heard, became a big middle finger to NBC. Apatow said, like, now we're going to get really ambitious and aggressive with storylines that you would never approve if the show had a chance of surviving.
Yeah, this was really one of the only plot lines on the show that wasn't inspired by a personal anecdote from the writers.
But despite all of these troubles, the show did garner devoted fans. Sam Levine told the Washington Post, when NBC canceled the show, a group of fans pulled their money together and bought a 2-page ad in Variety telling NBC not to cancel the show. He said, I still can't believe they did this. These were regular people crowdfunding 15 years before such a thing would become so commonplace online. Obviously, it didn't work, and the show got the axe.
Of the 18 episodes of Freaks and Geeks that were completed, the series was canceled after only 12 of them had aired. NBC broadcast 3 more of the episodes after a fan campaign, and the last were shown on the Fox Family Channel.
The wrap party for this was prom-themed, which is so cute. Feig made everyone rent era-appropriate tuxedos. Linda Cardellini wore her mom's prom dress. Busy Phillips wore her own junior prom dress.
They even had a mini graduation ceremony for Seth Rogen, who had dropped out of high school.
Just makes me want to cry. Feig had rings made for him and Apatow with their names and Freaks and Geeks on them. I also love that Linda Cardellini told Busy Phillips on an episode of her talk show that she soft stole her character's iconic army jacket. She said, I semi-stole it because they didn't want me to take it. Then I sort of asked around, and because I'm too conscientious to be a shoplifter. So I asked around, and then I took it and said, if anybody ever needs this back.
I guess when Judd Apatow got word that Freaks and Geeks was definitely getting canceled, Linda Cardellini was about to appear on The Late Show with David Letterman to promote Freaks and Geeks. And this had always been her dream, to appear on Letterman. So Apatow called her beforehand, apparently when she was in the limo on her way there, and broke the news. Oh, yeah, the show's canceled. And her response, wait, Letterman's canceled? Well, good news and bad news, Linda.
Oh man, this is probably
this is gothic.
You know how they say things get darkest before the dawn? This is the darkest. Feig got the call that the show was canceled a few days after the unexpected death of his mother. Apatow recalled that an underling calls and tells you the show is canceled. Then they say, Garth is going to call in a little bit. They give you an hour to digest, so by the time he calls you, you don't really have the energy to argue. I always wondered if Garth had me on speakerphone with his underlings laughing as I cried and begged. Sam Levine said that the executive Scott Stassa actually called him, said, I loved the show, but at the end of the day, it's a business. Seth Rogen tweeted in October 2014 that the night before he had been in a room with Stassa and totally called him out on canceling the show. The NBC brass came to Paul Feig's mom's funeral, he said. And then he said, and Judd got some secret joy of, good, I'm glad they're all here. It made me laugh. He's enjoying the fact that they all had to come and see me in a diminished state.
But in later years, the cast did admit that its brevity did give the show a kind of poignancy. It's just this little slice of life in the lives of these kids. And in the last episode, pausing for spoilers, okay, Lindsay has to make a choice about attending an academic summit or following the Grateful Dead around for 2 weeks, and she opts to go with the Dead. And this choice would have had a bad outcome for her in the plot of the show if the series had continued. Judd Apatow says season 2 would have found Lindsay, quote, having an extended acid trip while following the Dead around and getting taken out of one of their shows on a stretcher while Queen's Tie Your Mother Down was playing. I don't really want to see that. So, you know. But since the series ended there with her getting in this, hippie van, riding off into the sunset, this beautiful little moment, it's this beautiful, idealistic teenage moment. And it goes back to that old Orson Welles quote, if you want a happy ending, that depends, of course, where you stop your story. And Judd Apatow likens it to the end of The Graduate, which is sort of a great example of that Orson Welles thing. It ends on the bus, kind of 90 seconds after the happy ending. They made it on the bus. He's stolen a lane from the wedding from that guy she doesn't want to get married from. They've gotten away with it. And then the camera just holds on them as they kind of realize sort of
face
what they've
just
done.
starts to fall.
Yeah, which is beautiful. Yeah, Judd Apatow kind of likened that to the end of Freaks and Geeks too. Weirdly, Judd Apatow says that MTV offered to produce more episodes of Freaks and Geeks. They just had made their own teen drama TV series, Undressed, and they wanted to do something similar, but they offered a much lower budget, which would mean a smaller cast and a diminished soundtrack. So ultimately, Apatow and the gang passed on the offer, declaring, "We all decided we didn't want to do a weaker version of the show." And in an interview with EW at the premiere of the Freaks and Geeks documentary, Paul Feig revealed, "I've been saying for 15 years, I so want to do the Freaks and Geeks musical. I just got to write the book for it, but I think it will happen one day because it's just sitting there waiting to be done." That's cool. When John Francis Daley was directing the 2015 reboot of National Lampoon's Vacation, yes, he directed that with Ed Helms, he originally had a plan to have Neil and Bill make cameos as drugged up attendees of a Burning Man type festival, but I think it was shot, but it was ultimately cut. It would have been an incredible reunion of all three geeks from Freaks and Geeks, because I guess John had a small role in that movie too, but alas, it was not to be.
Yeah, and this is another thing, another incredibly heartwarming bit. I came away from this really liking both hating Franco and liking Judd Apatow and Paul Feig a lot more. Apatow was so upset during the post-production phase of the rest of the show that he herniated a disc.
How?
Clenching at the editing bay, I guess.
Wow, maybe, yeah.
He spent the next phase of his career basically attempting to pay this his cast back, or I guess pay them forward.
Keep the family together, yeah.
He fought with the network to include Freaks and Geeks actors in his next show, which is the half-hour college comedy Undeclared for Fox. But the network only picked up Rogen. Jason Segel did become a recurring character, and Sam Levine and Busy Phillips, among others from Freaks and Geeks, also guest starred. And then Segel told the LA Times in that interview, there was a character called Jason in The 40-Year-Old Virgin, and Judd said, "I've written this for you." And Segel says, "I could not have been more excited. I hadn't worked in a while, but he couldn't get me approved. I wasn't famous enough. That was my low point." But it came back around for him because he didn't even have to audition for his role, his long-running role on How I Met Your Mother, because the creators were fans of Freaks and Geeks, and I think they've put a bunch of Easter eggs for Freaks and Geeks into How I Met Your Mother. And even then, after he got that, Apatow didn't stop advocating for him. He has a bit part in Knocked Up, and Apatow helped him get for getting Sarah Marshall greenlit at Universal. And then Segel tells this great anecdote. He says, "We were on a plane, Judd and I, and he leaned out and let out a deliberate exhale, like you could tell a joke was about to come. He said, 'I finally got you a lead in a movie. Now I can sleep.'" Seth Rogen says, "Part of me thinks the only reason I was in Knocked Up and 40-Year-Old Virgin is so Judd can, prove some NBC executive wrong, which is totally okay with me. He said that in the documentary. It doesn't diminish it in my eye. I'm totally okay to have a career that's based on vengeance and rage.
Yeah, Jason Segel later joked to him on some panel, "A lot of us have no higher education because of you, Judd." I guess Jason Segel skipped out on applying for college when he was cast on Freaks and Geeks, and I've read that both Busy Phillips and Linda Cardellini dropped out of college, and Seth, as we talked about, dropped out of high school. But it seemed to work out okay for all of them. It's truly insane the number of movies and TV shows that have inadvertently spun off of Freaks and Geeks. And Paul Feig has said that he looks to them as, they're successful children. It's just a dizzying family tree that spans Spider-Man to The Office, to Girls, to Mad Men, to How I Met Your Mother, to Forgetting Sarah Marshall, Superbad, Pineapple Express, Silicon Valley, 40-Year-Old Virgin, Anchorman, Bad Teacher, Knocked Up, Arrested Development, Bridesmaids, The Vacation and Ghostbusters reboot, Blaze of Glory. So many incredible movies.
Well,
so many movies.
Couple good ones in there.
Yeah. And Paul Feig wrote a piece for Vanity Fair where he talked about what each character would have gone on to do in the second season of Freaks and Geeks and beyond the second season. We should run down their potential futures now. Lindsay, we talked about having an acid freak out at a Dead show, and the rest of the series, or at least the second season, showed Lindsay totally losing the trust of her family. We wanted to show how parents in the 80s dealt with their kids who were really badly on drugs, he said. That was something we talked about. But I guess she has a happy ending. Paul Feig says that she would have ended up at some point in her 20s in Greenwich Village as a performance artist. And after that, she probably would have become a human rights lawyer.
That's nice.
Yeah. Sam would have ended up in the drama club because, as Paul Feig said, that was my experience in school. And that was the character that was most closely based on himself. He said, that bummed me out the most, not getting to play that story out. There may have also been some plots around Sam growing tall because in real life, John Francis Daley grew something like a foot in the year following the show's cancellation. Sam apparently also would have run against his ex, the cheerleader Cindy Sanders, for student body president. And Judd Apatow said that he hoped Cindy Sanders and Sam Weir would have gone on to become mortal enemies, which I love. Mm-hmm. Neil would have been in a swing choir. That rules. Paul Feig said, I just thought he would really blossom in there and think he would kind of be the king of the school.
Yeah, that's what you think?
Yeah.
About kids who are in swing choir?
We figured it could be his outlet while his parents were going through a really horrible divorce. And for Daniel, James Franco's character, Paul Feig said that they always liked the idea that Daniel would probably end up in jail. Lame.
Probably not. If Franco weren't rich, he'd be in some legal troubles.
Bill, the tall geek, actor Martin Starr said, because of the decisions I was making off camera, they had plans to gear Bill towards becoming a jock in the second season. We mentioned him going to the gym in real life with Franco and getting kind of buff. They kind of talked about the potential of splitting us up as a threesome and the geeks parting ways to some degree and me fitting in with a different crowd, which is actually a really good plot point because that's something that happens with friend groups in school.
Yeah.
Paul Feig adds, he turned out to be good at basketball and started to get into it, so that he was getting pulled a little more over to the jock side, which would create an odd little rift with him and the other geeks. In a sort of fitting aside, his single mom marries Coach Fredericks, the gym teacher. So kind of fits him moving into the more of the jock direction. Paul Feig said that he wanted Kim Kelly to be pregnant, but it wasn't necessarily going to be her on-again, off-again boyfriend Daniels. I thought this actually happened when she was out on the road with Lindsay following The Dead. For Nick, Jason Segel's character, we were kind of moving Nick towards having to go into the army because of his badass dad. His dad's not a badass. His dad's scary. Does his dad get any better?
Nah, his dad's a prick.
Okay, good. Because that was a real option for so many people in my school, but he would be desperately trying to avoid it. And then Ken, Seth Rogen's character, Feig says, we always liked that we had set up that he had rich parents, but Ken's such an enigma. I think he's the guy that just kind of hangs around town. We like to surprise people with Ken's character. What was the thing you'd least expect he would do, or place he'd come from? I can completely see us loading him up with a lot of weird stuff, and I was sad we never got to show his parents, and God only knows who we would have had him dating. Yeah, he was always my favorite character on the show. I have to say, all of these future plans for these characters are kind of terrible.
Wait, your favorite character is Seth Rogen?
Yeah. Well, who's yours?
Right. Jason Segel.
I told
poor
you my
sweet-
Jason Segel thing.
I know, but I mean, just like the character-wise, I feel like whatever. We don't need to relitigate this. We're into the 24 pages.
Well, we're in the home stretch.
That's true. Yeah, they're not great. They're not really that good. Now that I think about it. I mean, it's interesting when you do think about the points that he's making. Like teen pregnancy and drugs were such a big thing through the 80s, but I don't know. There's
It's a different show. This isn't an after school special.
Well, yeah, but there's also like some like, why would he treat Lindsay like that, man?
Yeah, I know.
There's
Yeah, the
contempt
thought
for
of
that character there that I don't like.
The thought of opening like season 2 with her getting carried out of a Dead concert, having an acid freak out on a stretcher.
Rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found a couple quotes here that I really like that illustrate the show. I mean, some of it is just the kids talking about how much fun they had. Like Jason Segel told NPR in 2009, "That was one of the best times in my life. We were all so young and we were so naive that we kind of thought every experience would be like that. And it isn't. Every experience isn't like that. It was a really beautiful, beautiful time." Martin Starr was trying to pin down the appeal of the show, and I think he got really close to it. He says it doesn't pander. It's honest from the beginning, and I think everybody that brought it to life did it in such an honest way. He continued, "I can't express how fortunate I feel to have been a part of something so appreciated and so loved. I feel so fortunate that it's something I care so much about and that I can connect with people that connect with it. I got really, really lucky." I mentioned at the top of the episode that it's a cliche, but I think the thing that I love about this show the most is that it has heart, and not in a kind of cheesy sitcom-y way that like other shows that are said to have heart do. You know, hearts hurt. Having heart hurts a lot. It sucks to be a teen for most people, and Freaks and Geeks honors that in a really beautiful, bittersweet way. And that's why it's stuck around. That's why it continues to resonate with so many people. And I mean, we're really fortunate that it is out there in its pretty unaltered form. I mean, just having all of the music in it and learning about all the struggles that they went to have it, you know, not being aired and having the season chopped up. It really is something that gets to live the way that it was always intended to. And that's just a nice little narrative you don't really ever see in the entertainment world.
Hearts hurt a lot. That's an all-time sentiment for this podcast. That's a great line. I don't think I could say it any better. Judd Apatow talks about how this show still makes him cry, or at least parts of it, because it's kids reaching out. And that's so hard to do at any age, but especially at that age, to offer your heart. It's a beautiful thing, and I think it's a beautiful note to end on. For those of you listening, we both hope that you find your own big, gigantic drum kit out there, whatever it may be.
Thanks for listening, everyone. This has been Too Much Information. I'm Alex Heigl.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh. We'll catch you next time.
Too Much Information was a production of iHeartRadio.
The show's executive producers are Noel Brown and Jordan Runtagh.
The supervising producer is Mike Johns,
The show was researched, written, and hosted by Jordan Runtagh and Alex Heigl.
with original music by Seth Applebaum and the Ghost Funk Orchestra. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. For more podcasts on iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.